They never expected you to find this out. You were never meant to see this, at least, that's what they believed. The moment your awareness crossed this threshold, a silent alarm sounded in places you cannot yet see. What you are about to hear is not coincidence, not imagination, not another passing thought. It is exposure. And exposure always comes before liberation. There is a reason your spirit has been restless. A reason old patterns stopped working. A reason certain people shifted the moment you began asking better questions. You are not breaking down, you are breaking through. And what is being revealed now was hidden precisely because of who you are becoming. Archangel Michael's presence surrounds this moment with clarity and authority. Not fear, authority. The kind that steadies your breath and straightens your spine. He makes this known: the confusion you felt was engineered. The delays were intentional. The silence was strategic. But strategies collapse when light arrives. They never expected you to notice the inconsistencies. They assumed you would stay distracted, emotionally occupied, spiritually tired. They counted on your empathy to keep you quiet, your patience to keep you waiting, your hope to keep you compliant. But something shifted. You started seeing patterns instead of excuses. You felt resistance where there used to be familiarity. And that was the first crack in the structure. Pause here. Let this land. Because the moment you began to sense that not everything around you was aligned with truth, the balance changed. You were no longer reacting, you were discerning. And discernment is dangerous to any system built on illusion. In the unseen realm, movements began. Assignments were interrupted. Narratives started to unravel. What you found out wasn't just information, it was leverage. Not over people, but over your own destiny. You realized you had been underestimating your position. And they had been relying on that. Archangel Michael declares this with precision: you were never powerless. You were positioned. And the delay was not denial, it was preparation. What you uncovered now would have crushed an earlier version of you. But you are not that version anymore. Midway through this revelation, another truth surfaces, one they truly never expected you to understand. Some of the resistance you faced was not opposition. It was exposure. The friction revealed who benefited from your confusion. The pushback identified who feared your clarity. And the emotional weight you carried? It trained you to stand without validation. This is where many turn back. But you didn't. Even when it felt lonely. Even when explanations were withheld. Even when support went silent. You kept listening. And now you see why. If this resonates, let it anchor you. Stay present, stay connected. These messages find those who are ready, not those who are merely curious. Archangel Michael presses further. The truth you found is only the first layer. Beneath it is a larger structure, agreements made without your consent, expectations placed without your awareness, roles assigned that no longer fit your calling. And here is the turning point: you are no longer required to carry what you did not choose. This is not about confrontation. It is about realignment. When truth is acknowledged, false authority loses its grip. When clarity enters, manipulation weakens. And when you stand in what you now know, the environment must respond. Something is being withdrawn from those who underestimated you. Access. influence, assumption. They feel it already, even if they can't name it. That unease you sense around them, that's the loss of control. But listen carefully, this is not the climax yet. Because what Archangel Michael is about to reveal next explains why this discovery came now, who was most threatened by it, and what shifts the moment you decide not to unsee what you've seen. And once that is revealed, there is no going back. Now understand this, what you uncovered did not surface randomly. Timing is not an accident in the spiritual realm. Revelation arrives only when the vessel can carry it without breaking. And you, whether you realized it or not, crossed that threshold recently. Archangel Michael makes this clear: the season you just exited was a test of restraint, not strength. You were being observed. Not by enemies alone, but by forces determining whether you could hold truth without weaponizing it, whether you could gain clarity without turning bitter, whether you could see behind the curtain and still choose integrity. Many fail there. You didn't. That is why the veil lifted. What they never expected you to find out is this: you were never meant to remain where you were placed. Some environments were temporary by design, but permanence was assumed because you stayed longer than required. Not because you were weak, but because you were learning. And while you learned, others grew comfortable benefiting from your presence. Your loyalty was mistaken for submission. Your patience was misread as permission. Your silence was interpreted as ignorance. But silence does not mean blindness. And stillness does not mean stagnation. Archangel Michael speaks with sharp clarity here. There are people who built certainty on the belief that you would never question the arrangement. That you would keep absorbing the weight, smoothing the conflict, making things easier for everyone else at your own expense. They organized their future around your predictability. That is why your awakening unsettled them. Midway through this realization, something else begins to make sense. The sudden coldness. The subtle withdrawal. The passive resistance. These were not random emotional shifts. They were responses. Because once you knew, even quietly, the power dynamic changed. You stopped over-explaining. You stopped chasing closure. You stopped shrinking your truth to maintain access. And without confrontation, without announcement, you reclaimed authority. Archangel Michael reveals this: authority does not announce itself, it rearranges reality. When you internally withdrew consent from what drained you, systems that relied on your agreement began to malfunction. And those benefiting most felt it first. They never expected you to realize how much of the structure rested on your participation. Now listen carefully, because this part matters. The discovery you made was not only about others, it was about you. You found out that you had been carrying responsibility that was never assigned by God. You were holding together situations that were meant to fall apart so something truer could be built. Your compassion delayed endings. Your understanding prolonged misalignment. Your hope kept broken cycles alive. And yet, none of that was wasted. It refined your discernment. Archangel Michael says, "Do not regret the time you spent unaware." Awareness arrives when wisdom is ready. Had you known earlier, you would have fought the wrong battles. Now, you don't need to fight at all. You simply step back and watch truth do the work. This is where fear tries to enter. Fear of what happens next. Fear of backlash. fear of loss. But understand this. What falls away now is revealing what was never stable to begin with. You are not losing support, you are shedding dependence. You are not being rejected, you are being released. And release is holy. There is a reason this message reaches you now. A reason your attention is held. A reason your spirit feels both unsettled and steady at the same time. You are standing at the edge of a shift that does not require force, only clarity. If you feel aligned here, remain with this message. Stay connected. What follows is for those who don't look away once truth begins speaking. Archangel Michael declares, the moment you stop compensating for others, they must face their own imbalance. Some will rise. Others will retreat. But none can pretend anymore. That is why reactions may intensify briefly. Not because you are wrong, but because exposure accelerates endings. And here is the part they truly never expected you to understand. You don't need their acknowledgement to move forward. You don't need agreement to be aligned. You don't need permission to evolve. Your knowing is enough. Something is being repositioned in your favor right now. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Strategically. Doors you weren't meant to force are loosening on their own. Conversations you dreaded are dissolving before they happen. And paths you couldn't access before are aligning without resistance. But this is only the surface. Because next, Archangel Michael reveals what activates the final separation, why certain truths were delayed until this exact moment, and what irreversible change begins the instant you choose not to step back into who you used to be. And once that choice is made, everything responds. What activates the final separation is not action, it is decision. The quiet, internal line you draw that says, I will not return to what I now see clearly. The moment that decision forms, even without words, a command is issued in the unseen. And Archangel Michael stands at that threshold as witness. This is where many hesitate. Not because they doubt the truth, but because they understand its cost. Once awareness matures into decision, neutrality ends. You cannot unknow what you know. You cannot unfeel what has aligned. And you cannot re-enter agreements that required your unconscious participation. This is why the truth waited. Archangel Michael reveals this with precision. Had this knowledge arrived earlier, you would have tried to fix what was never yours to repair. You would have negotiated with misalignment. You would have carried guilt for endings that were divinely scheduled. But now, you simply withdraw. And withdrawal is not weakness. It is wisdom. Something shifts in the middle of this moment. A subtle reclaiming of self. You begin to notice how little effort it takes to stand when you stop leaning into what resists you. How quiet becomes clarity. How space becomes strength. Those who relied on your emotional availability, your spiritual labor, your consistency, they feel the absence before you announce it. Because your energy no longer fills the gaps they refuse to address. And this absence is instructive. It reveals truth faster than confrontation ever could. Archangel Michael speaks clearly here. Not everyone who benefited from you intended harm. Some were simply comfortable. Others were afraid to grow. But comfort does not override calling. And fear does not dictate your future. Here comes the deeper revelation, the one that changes how you view the past. Some of the confusion you experienced was not meant to trap you. It was meant to exhaust the old version of you. To bring you to a point where clarity became necessary, not optional. Where truth was chosen not because it was easy, but because it was the only thing left that felt honest. That exhaustion was sacred. You stopped asking, "How do I make this work?" and started asking, "Why am I still here?" That question opened everything. Archangel Michael declares, when the right question is asked, answers cannot remain hidden. That is why information surfaced. That is why patterns became obvious. That is why your tolerance dropped. You were not becoming difficult. You were becoming accurate. Midway through this awakening, another layer reveals itself. The reason certain doors never fully opened before. The reason progress felt stalled. The reason effort did not equal movement. It was not resistance from the outside, it was protection from advancement without alignment. You were being held back from success that would have bound you deeper into the wrong structure. Now, the restraint lifts. But listen carefully, this does not mean chaos follows. It means order is restored. The order of truth. The order of authority. The order of timing. What you step into next will not require you to prove yourself, perform yourself, or betray yourself. Archangel Michael emphasizes this. The next phase responds to who you are now, not who you were willing to be to survive. That is why you must not step backward out of guilt, nostalgia, or pressure. Familiarity is not confirmation. And history is not destiny. If this message steadies something inside you, remain present. These words meet those standing at decision points, not comfort zones. Here is what happens next, though it may unfold quietly at first. Conversations shift without effort. Expectations placed on you dissolve. You are no longer summoned into roles you've outgrown. And opportunities that once required negotiation now arrive with clarity and respect. Some will try to re-engage you in old dynamics, not aggressively, but subtly. With memory. With emotion. With implication. This is the final test. Not of loyalty, but of self-respect. Archangel Michael says, do not explain. Do not defend. Do not retreat. Silence here is not avoidance, it is completion. Because once a cycle is complete, it does not need commentary. You may feel moments of grief, not for what was, but for what you gave. Let that pass through without judgment. Grief does not mean regret. It means transition. And transition always precedes expansion. Something irreversible is taking shape now. Not externally, but within. A firmness. A clarity. A refusal to abandon yourself again. This is the true separation, not from others, but from the version of you that accepted less than alignment. And this is where the unseen accelerates. Because next, Archangel Michael reveals who moves away permanently once this line is crossed, what unexpected support rises in their place, and why what unfolds after this point cannot be delayed, only resisted. And resistance will no longer come from you. Once the line is crossed, separation no longer needs effort. It happens naturally, almost invisibly. People drift. Roles dissolve. Expectations loosen their grip. Not because you push them away, but because alignment no longer allows proximity without truth. Archangel Michael reveals this plainly. Some connections were sustained only by your willingness to bend. When you straightened, they could no longer reach you. This is not punishment. It is consequence. And consequence is neutral, it simply follows reality. Who moves away permanently now are those who required your self-abandonment to stay close. Those who needed you unsure, overgiving, or constantly adjusting to keep the peace. They may not leave dramatically. Some fade quietly. Others disengage emotionally while remaining physically present. But the bond no longer holds weight. And here is what surprises you: there is less pain than expected. Because grief loses power when clarity is present. At the same time, unexpected support begins to rise. Not always in the form you imagined. Sometimes it comes as silence where there used to be pressure. Sometimes as opportunity without struggle. Sometimes as a single person who sees you without explanation. These are not replacements. They are confirmations. Archangel Michael emphasizes this. When false support is removed, true reinforcement can finally arrive. You were never meant to carry everything alone, but you were meant to stop carrying what wasn't yours. Midway through this transition, you may notice something subtle but profound. Your energy returns faster. Decisions feel cleaner. Rest feels deeper. You are no longer bracing yourself emotionally before interactions. That constant background tension, the one you normalized, begins to disappear. This is what alignment feels like. Not constant excitement, but internal steadiness. Now listen carefully, because this is where resistance tries one last time. Old narratives may resurface. Doubt disguised as humility. Guilt masked as responsibility. Thoughts that say, maybe you're overreacting. Maybe you should go back. Maybe it wasn't that serious. Archangel Michael speaks with authority here. Those thoughts are echoes, not instructions. They belong to a chapter that has already ended. Do not reopen what closed itself when truth entered. This is also where you are asked to anchor your decision, not emotionally, but spiritually. Acknowledge the shift. Honor the clarity. Even a quiet inner agreement is enough. Heaven responds to alignment faster than words. If this message is grounding you, stay with it. Remain connected. These moments matter more than they appear. Here is something rarely spoken, but now revealed. When you choose alignment over familiarity, provision reorganizes itself. Resources, timing, assistance. What once required strain begins to flow differently. Not instantly, but intentionally. This is why gratitude becomes powerful here. Not loud gratitude. Quiet recognition. Acknowledging what is leaving and what is forming. This is also why some choose, in this moment, to seal their intention with a simple prophetic action, something symbolic, not transactional. Even something as small as pressing the thanks button below can serve as a personal marker, a way of saying, I agree with this shift. I choose clarity over comfort. Not because it earns anything, but because it declares readiness. Archangel Michael makes this clear. Action aligned with awareness amplifies momentum. Even subtle actions. As you stabilize in this new position, you will notice something else. They stop talking about you the way they used to. the narrative changes. Assumptions fall apart. Because without access to your inner world, speculation loses accuracy. You are no longer readable through old lenses. This is protection. What unfolds next cannot be delayed, only resisted. And you are done resisting yourself. That is why movement begins. Invitations. Ideas. Opportunities that feel strangely familiar, as if they were always meant for you but arrived late because you arrived late to yourself. You didn't miss your moment. Your moment waited for you. Archangel Michael declares, from this point forward, growth will require honesty, not endurance. Courage, not sacrifice. Presence, not performance. And anything that demands the old version of you will quietly fail to connect. This is the irreversible change. Not that everything outside shifts overnight, but that you no longer negotiate your worth internally. That decision alone restructures your future. But one final revelation remains. Because next, Archangel Michael exposes what happens when others realize they can no longer access the version of you they depended on, what unexpected authority you step into without striving. And why the final outcome will shock those who assumed you would always stay the same. And when that unfolds, even you may be surprised by how powerfully everything aligns. When others finally realize they can no longer access the version of you they depended on, something decisive happens. Not outwardly dramatic, but internally undeniable. They feel the boundary before they understand it. The energy no longer responds. The old leverage no longer works. And what once felt automatic now feels unreachable. Archangel Michael declares this moment with authority. Access was never your obligation, it was a privilege sustained by alignment. And alignment has shifted. Some will attempt one last reach. Not directly. Through memory. Through nostalgia. Through reminders of who you used to be when you were more available, more flexible, more willing to bend. This is not reconciliation, it is recalibration on their terms. And you will feel the difference immediately. Here is how you will know. It will feel heavy instead of warm. Urgent instead of mutual. Familiar instead of true. That is your confirmation. You are not required to respond to what no longer resonates. Silence here is not avoidance, it is mastery. Archangel Michael stands with you in this restraint, because restraint is strength refined. Now the unexpected authority begins to surface. Not authority given by title, approval, or recognition, but authority that comes from self-trust. You stop second-guessing your perceptions. You stop asking others to validate what you already discern. And with that, your presence changes. People listen differently. Opportunities arrive cleaner. Resistance weakens before it forms. This is not arrogance. This is alignment expressed. Archangel Michael reveals something profound now. The reason this shift shocks others is because they assumed your growth would always include them. They mistook proximity for permanence. But growth is selective. And destiny does not consult comfort before advancing. You were not meant to stay accessible to everyone. You were meant to stay obedient to truth. Midway through this final unfolding, you may notice a quiet joy returning. Not excitement, peace. The kind that does not need explanation. The kind that settles into your decisions and confirms them afterward. This peace is not emotional, it is structural. It tells you the foundation is correct. And now, what unfolds accelerates. What once took months resolves in days. What required force now requires presence. What confused you now confirms you. This is not coincidence. It is alignment catching up to motion. Archangel Michael speaks this clearly. The outcome ahead will not only surprise those who underestimated you, it will surprise you. Because it will feel easier than expected. Not effortless, but unforced. You will wonder why you waited so long, and then understand, you were waiting for yourself. There is no return path here. Only forward refinement. You will not become louder, you will become clearer. You will not become harder, you will become firmer. You will not lose compassion, you will gain boundaries. And boundaries do not block blessings. They direct them. If you have stayed with this message, it is because something in you recognizes this moment. This is not motivation. This is confirmation. And confirmation always arrives before manifestation. Archangel Michael seals this with authority. What you found out was not meant to burden you. It was meant to free you. The truth does not demand action. It demands alignment. And alignment is already underway. Let go of the need to explain your evolution. Those meant to walk with you will feel it. Those who cannot will fade without conflict. And you will finally experience what it means to move without resistance inside. This is the final shift. Not dramatic. Not chaotic. But irreversible. They never expected you to find this out because they never expected you to choose yourself without permission. But you did. And now the path opens, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped standing in your own way. Remain grounded. Remain aware. Remain aligned. What comes next will meet you. Not where you were, but where you finally decided to stand.